Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. For Sunday, November 2nd, I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Purdue game in 6 days, the game against Michigan in 27 days. If you were planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. The Ohio State Buckeyes have 5 games coming up in the month of November. Number 1, check it off the list, the to-do list. This was not a particularly difficult one to cross off of the to-do list either in a way that would have been shocking before the season. Ohio State handles Penn State 38-14. I'm joined by Kevin Noon of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Kevin, this was a game where Ohio State was really in control for basically 58 minutes or so. You had a couple minutes where things got a little wonky right before halftime, and all of a sudden Ohio State's going into the halftime with a 3-point lead instead of a much bigger lead. But it also felt like a game where you never once thought, oh boy, they might be in trouble here.
No, but I did hear the voice of some of our subscribers over at Buckeye Huddle. It's Penn State, weird things happen. Mm-hmm. Yes, there was a stretch of where Ohio State had to erase double-digit leads and came back and won games by a point in each of them. You go back a couple years prior to the game at Penn State where Ohio State had a field goal blocked. I mean, strange things happen, but the reality is that this Penn State team is not a typical Penn State team. This Ohio State defense is pretty special. But I did hear the voices saying, "See, this is the kind of stuff that happens when you have a fumble in your own deep in your own end, and what happens there." But yeah, even at 17-14, at no point did I say, "Well, maybe I should start working on a can you believe what I just saw piece." That was never in the equation.
And one of the reasons was that Penn State really struggled to get anything going on offense. They ended up averaging 3.3 yards per play, which I will do the math for you. You can run 3 plays and average 3.3 yards per play, and you don't get a first down, even if you do that 3 times. It's just a little bit short. You have to bring out the sticks, but they couldn't. They had a 26-yard run on the first play of the game. They got the ball across midfield on the first snap of the game, and it was like, that's a little unexpected. And then that drive bogged down and they punted in plus territory, which is a whole separate conversation. But then they never really got anything else moving on offense almost the entire game. It was 4 plays, 33 yards, punt, 3 plays, 7 yards, punt. They had 1 touchdown drive, 15 plays, 75 yards. And then other than that, 6 plays, 12 yards, punt. Then the touchdown right after the turnover where it's a 13-yard drive. 7 plays, 16 yards, punt, 6 plays, 2 yards, punt, 3 plays, negative 11 yards, punt, and then the last drive where they ended up with an interception. But at that point, the game's functionally over anyway.
Done, yeah.
So it was, at that point, it was a 24-point game, and Ohio State is playing Zombie Nation, that is the official, the old Red Auerbach victory cigar. When Ohio State is playing your celebration song because you are getting dragged across the field, that is the Red Auerbach victory cigar at this point. This was another really solid day for the Ohio State defense, but man, oh man, you had some real standouts here. 12 tackles for Arvell Reese, 8 tackles for Caden McDonald. This is just, once again, you just look at this defense and you go, I don't know who deserves the credit, because it feels like you could just kind of go, yeah, everyone's phenomenal.
But I think people will gravitate toward the couple of plays. Certainly the first play, there were a couple of plays that Penn State did have that people will be like, see, not everything is perfect in Mudville. But 12 tackles from Arvell Reese, Caden McDonald with his 8. I mean, he tried to pick up a ball that was on the ground, wasn't able, he should have fallen on it. I mean, maybe Ohio State would have been able to punch even one more in at this point, but bettors were happy with the game. I don't know where it was in terms of the total, but bettors were happy with the outcome of the game. But yeah, again, just the stark contrast that everybody wanted to make this Matt Patricia versus Jim Knowles and what was there. But Matt Patricia was dealing with a deck that had a lot of aces in it, and Jim Knowles, he had a lot of face cards in his deck, but not enough aces, and he busted out.
Yeah, they're playing war, and it's like, well, one side has 4 aces, and it's pretty hard to win if the other side has 4 aces. Ohio State, 4 sacks on the game, 7 tackles for loss. They really, really controlled things up front, and Penn State just never got anything going offensively, really. 1.8 yards per carry. Now that includes sacks, but the 2 running backs, 3.6 yards per carry and 3 yards a carry. And outside of that first play, it was really about 2.5 yards per carry and 3 yards a carry. And the leading receiver had 5 receptions and 26 yards, unless you want to go with the guy that had fewer receptions but more yards. He had 3 receptions for 28 yards. So there was really just sort of nothing there for Penn State throughout the game, and that's not surprising. That you knew they were coming in sort of facing an uphill climb with a redshirt freshman quarterback in Ethan Grunkemeyer, who was in there because Drew Aller had that season-ending injury. But Ohio State did to Penn State exactly what you should do to a team in that position.
It was the boa constrictor, and they just started constricting and constricting and constricting. And the reality is I do not know who to hold responsible at Penn State for their lack of wide receivers, because they go to the portal every year, and this is going to be the guy. Well, that didn't work. This is going to be the guy. Well, that doesn't work. Well, this year, they went and they got some guys that had, some pedigree at smaller stops, and it just did not translate to Penn State. And again, you lose Drew Aller, and that's a problem. But Andy Koldenicki, the offensive coordinator, he's probably feeling a lot of heat because this offense has been pretty mediocre to mediocre minus this season. Yes, congratulations, you put up 24 as a team against Iowa last week in a 25-24 loss to the Hawkeyes, but I don't think that Penn State knew that they knew they weren't going to come in here, and if they gave up 38 to Ohio State, that they were going to score 39 or more. That just wasn't going to be the case.
Yeah, they were not going to win a shootout for sure. And one of the reasons is it's pretty hard to keep up with Ohio State. The Penn State offense wasn't going to be able to keep up with Ohio State, but it's hard for anyone to keep up with Ohio State because we'll talk about we will end with the bad vibes on the running game, but first let's hit the passing game, because holy Moses, 87% completion for Julian Sayin, 20 for 23, 316 yards, 4 touchdowns. I don't know how many times you have a guy who throws more than 20 passes and throws more touchdowns than incompletions, but I'm going to guess however many times it's happened in college football history, you probably win most of those games.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty positive thing. Ohio State runs, unless my math is wrong, 55 plays on offense. 55 plays. We talked about 60, 62, whatever. They come in below that, but Julian Sayin, 87% completion percentage, 4 touchdowns, 3 incompletions. I probably have an easier time going over the 3 incompletions than I do the 4 touchdowns, just based on what you remember, because I think you're more shocked when there is an incomplete pass, and whether or not it's a throwaway or if it's just something that didn't, you're going back shoulder and it just doesn't work or whatever. But Julian Sayin needs to be a serious Heisman candidate at this point. And I know that there are people that think that the university should have freezer magnets and should have bobbleheads and everything else, and that's just not generally.
Is it still 1996?
No? That's what I was just about to say. That's not how things work now. I have an awesome bobblehead of Ed Oliver that the University of Houston sent out, and I'm not
former Heisman winner Ed Oliver.
Well, exactly. I'm not even a Heisman voter. I do vote on several other votes, but I don't have a Heisman vote. I'm still salty about that one, but it is what it is. But Julian Sayin needs to be considered a Heisman candidate. Not only a candidate, but I think that he needs to be in that top cut of candidates.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 3 incompletions. I think at least 1 or 2 of those were kind of throwaways based on, hey, there's no one open. So that's something, as you're looking in the film room, it's not just it's an incompletion. That was probably the right decision on this play. And, maybe his worst throw of the day was a touchdown, and that was the touchdown to Jeremiah Smith, where it was kind of, I think it was behind Jeremiah a little bit,
right.
And it very well could have been a safety. Jeremiah actually talked about that in the post-game interview, that he saved Julian Sayin's bacon a little bit.
He had his guys back, because if you throw a pick, you can't be graded out as a champion. So he wanted to make sure that his guy was okay. So he, whatever more than 100% effort from Jeremiah Smith is. I think we could heat the world with what over 100% of 110% of his reactor is. But he did what he needed to do.
Yeah, like going back one-handed, kind of reaching behind himself almost. It was it was, even by the standards of Jeremiah Smith, it was a notable catch, certainly. So the passing offense is what the passing offense is. They just kind of keep rolling, and it is, again, 87% completions for 316 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. No further questions, Your Honor. As far as the rushing game, it was okay. This is a Penn State team that really struggled to stop the run against Iowa. Iowa, I think, was maybe a little more consistent with the running game than Ohio State was, where, yeah, Bo Jackson finishes at 8.1 yards per carry, skewed a little bit by the 51-yarder. But Ohio State really continues, outside of that, continues to not really be able to hit the explosives. They were just kind of consistent. It was, 4.8 yards per carry for James Peoples, 2.4 for C.J. Donaldson, but he was in there in a lot of short yardage stuff. Isaiah West, 4 carries for 13 yards. But it was just kind of steady but unspectacular for the most part. But I mean, is that good enough?
Iowa ran the ball well because Iowa has to run the ball or it has nothing. I mean, obviously Ohio State has its passing offense, but Ohio State is going to need to be able to run the ball. We are in November. It was sub 40 as I was walking from my car to the stadium, but when I was down on the field in the fourth quarter, I had left my jacket in the media room because I didn't need it. Mm-hmm. But you're going to have to figure some of these things out. We see times where maybe the blocking scheme isn't there. We see times where the running backs just run to contact. I think we just see times of where teams just make plays against Ohio State for whatever reason. And, I've had people like, well, the line just isn't as good as it was last year. Well, let's not forget, first and foremost, the line last year was pretty special. Secondly, you had two guys that are like NFL backs now with Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson running the ball. And I'm not taking anything away from any of the backs that are in the rotation for Ohio State right now, but it's just not working at this point. And you got a couple weeks left in the laboratory because the next 3 games are not necessarily going to be what I would consider, air quotes, high leverage. Mm-hmm. So you got to get it figured out before you go to Ann Arbor. Yeah,
you're not going to hear Ryan Day talking about Purdue or UCLA or Rutgers as matchup games the way he did about Penn State. Ohio State very clearly could have taken Penn State lightly and looked at a 4-game losing streak and gone, come on. They very clearly took Penn State seriously, handled their business, and now you've got at Purdue, home for UCLA, home for Rutgers, and then that team up north, as they say, 27 days away. Can't believe it. Less than a month, and that game's going to be happening. So, and after that, well, we'll see. It's going to be boy, oh boy, could be a fascinating end of the season for Ohio State, because there's a lot of opportunities on the table for this team if they can continue to handle their business. They definitely did on Saturday in the Horseshoe, 38-14 over Penn State to improve to 8-0 on the year. We will have plenty more to talk about from this game in the next couple days. We'll have a full breakdown of that. And then next week, head on the road to Purdue for a 1 o'clock kickoff on Big Ten Network. Plenty of coverage there. And there will be plenty to talk about all week long at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where you can find our whole team covering the Buckeyes, covering the recruiting side of things, covering the X's and O's, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And also make sure you check us out at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. That is where you can find the best place to experience the Ross Fulton breakdowns, I think, for sure, where you get the video of the plays. You can really see what he's talking about. So make sure you check that out as well. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.